Hello everybody, Master Mason Michael. Today I was reflecting on the lost word of Masonry and pulled out a few books out of my library and see what early authors had to say about the lost word. I have my own opinions on it. In short, our older authors, as we will discover here together in a minute, basically believe the lost word to refer to this lost aspect of awareness that occurred with our fall from grace, if you will, fall from awareness of the immediate presence of God, and refer to the lost word as meaning that. I personally have an additional thought on the lost word that my research has suggested may also be a component of it. When we look at megalithic stone buildings around the planet that seem to have been made with some kind of ancient lost technology of working with stone that might have involved vibrational frequency, and there's as time goes on with this channel, if it grows and actually produces some income so I can dedicate the time required to really produce quality videos that show images and properly reference all the things that are in my head, but I can't remember the details, the references and dates, times, names, books, and all those references. It'd be great to be able to dedicate the time to really flesh all this work out. But I'm sure most of you are familiar with a famous expedition into, I don't know, Nepal or somewhere, where they believe it was a doctor who was researching the cultures that lived at that time in that area, was exposed to a group of, maybe they were monks. I'm sorry, I didn't look this up, so this is kind of rough. That gathered on a flat plain in a semicircle around a large stone, and they played large horns at it in a cacophony of sound that reached a feverish pitch and frequency such that the stone raised off the ground and flew into a cleft in the cliff position for the stone to land on. And that's just one of many examples from antiquity, and that's not so ancient actually, that suggests that sound was used as a method of moving large stones. It might have been used for healing and for transportation. For example, there's a lot of research been done on cathedrals, the semi-ancient cathedrals, the ones we find in Europe and on this continent, the North American continent, that involve dozens or more of super tall steeples with non-Christian crosses on them, with metal fingers and metal balls and wires leading down from them down inside, and many believe they were actually originally power stations and not places of worship. But on the front of these cathedrals are what are called rose circles, which many researchers today believe were climatic signatures of the frequency of the electricity that was being generated in the building. And maybe some of these cathedrals' frequencies were used for healing, maybe some of them for transportation, maybe some of them for power generation and transmission. But where I'm going with this is maybe there was a set of frequencies that, let me just stop for a minute. Language, the spoken language, is an undulating tone. When we listen to a language we don't know, it sounds almost musical. It doesn't actually mean anything to us. It's a very complex, structured set of undulating frequencies. When we know the language, we don't recognize the fact that it has this musical quality to it because we know what those various frequencies of vibrations mean as we recognize them as words. So I suggest that maybe an aspect of the lost word of Freemasonry might be a lost frequency. Maybe a set of frequencies, but we speak in Masonry of a lost word. And maybe it's referring to a frequency that was used for healing or or power generation or transportation, or specifically, I think in the case of Masonry, the manipulation of large blocks of stone. And I say this because Masonry sort of houses its core root of imagery. I mean, its whole symbolism revolves around the construction of King Solomon's Temple, which is one of these megalithic stone buildings. So I looked just here for the last hour through a bunch of my books of old authors, seeing what they had to say about the lost word. I mean, this has been my idea for a long time, and I haven't heard any other Masonic researcher come up with this sort of wacky idea. So I was kind of curious to see, did any early author maybe think of the lost word as being a lost frequency or vibration that might have been used as a root form of a technology? And I didn't. What I found, though, is the other meaning of the lost word, which, as you know, I'm very partial to, the concept of recognition of our true state, of our true nature, of who we really are, which is the eternal presence of the great creator, or great architect, or you might use the term God, although I hesitate to use the word God or Lord a lot because, while they're familiar terms in Western culture, from Western Christian culture, they're generally misunderstood by most Western Christian mystics as, most people have this image of God as being some kind of bearded deity in the sky who is separate from man and watches over man, and someone that we pray to is separate from us. But of course, if you've read my writings or heard me speak before, or anyone else that speaks on this subject, that this is actually something that is available immediately to all humans as an experience and a recognition that we are that which I'm talking about. But what I want to do, though, is maybe it'll help us both understand what Masonry means by the lost word by reading a few passages out of a few of these old books that I have in my library. And I always like to start with Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma. I have an old 40s copy here. I have a modern one on the bookshelf. It's interesting that the modern ones, page numbers are different, and a lot of the punctuation and capitalization is different. And I kind of think Albert Pike might have had a distinct idea in mind with the way the original book was laid out, and I look forward to a day when someone smarter than me, or maybe some computer software, can look for hidden messages in his work, because Albert Pike certainly was alive at a time and was exposed to work that had hidden messages encoded in it, and he was a super smart guy, and I kind of wonder if he might have encoded some secret messages about Masonry in Morals and Dogma. But in any case, I like to read the original copy, or, well, original-ish, because I don't have a first edition, but, all the later ones up until, I should look up the date someday when it got changed, but I refer to the old ones. So here, he's talking about, just to set the stage here, he's talking about the sciences and how, as the sciences developed, and we got telescopes and we got microscopes, and we understood chemistry and electricity, that complicated our concept of what the deity was, and just what the nature of the deity was in the creation of the observable space. And so then he says here, it says about electricity, apparently a link between matter and spirit, and still the deity only becomes more incomprehensible to us than ever, and we find that in our speculations we but reproduce over and over again the ancient thought, in capital letters, which always refers to truth, or reality, God. Where then, amid all these conflicting opinions, is the true word of a Mason? Now here he talks about the true word rather than the lost word, but I think they're synonymous. My brother, most of the questions which have thus tortured men's minds is not within the reach and grasp of the human intellect to understand, which is absolutely correct. This ineffable aspect of God's immediate presence can't be understood by the mind. It can't be understood by the thinking mind. But without understanding, as we explained to you heretofore, we may and must believe, which is the first step of realization. Is first you must believe that there is a God and that it is possible to know him. The true word of a Mason is to be found in the concealed and profound meaning of the ineffable name of deity communicated by God to Moses, and which meaning was long lost by the very precautions taken to conceal it. And this is something else that I've suggested in my study of Masonry, is that if Masonry exists as a message in a bottle for a future generation who could recognize its hidden meanings, it did such a good job that they may actually be permanently lost. The true pronunciation of that name wasn't, and I say this because the original writers of our gentle craft may have well recognized their hidden messages and thought they did a pretty good job of hiding it. But then after the age of forgetting occurred, they are no longer recognized and are so deeply veiled they may never be re-known. But I don't know, we're speculative Masons, right? We speculate. The true pronunciation of that name was in truth a secret, in which, however, was involved the far more profound secret of its meaning. In that meaning is included all the truth that can be known by us in regard to the nature of God. So I thought that was very interesting. And he goes on with his very flowery prose. So next, I turn to Steinmetz, not the Steinmetz of ether fame. You will find Ken Wheeler, Theorio Apophasis, speak a great deal about. One of the few people in the world that really understood how the underpinnings of the natural world originate from, to speak in religious terms, the mind of God, if you will. So he says here, of course we have to jump into the middle. So we'll start here. The 47th problem of Euclid is the key to Masonic symbology. It opens the door to the truth for which we are in search. If we must use a modern analogy, perhaps it had best be likened to a combination known only to a few. A key is too obvious. So let me interrupt for a minute. So in Masonry, there is, the main aspect of it is that there were three Master Masons that knew a code word, if you will, and that code word protected the secrets of Masonry. Well, we're told the secrets of a Master Mason, but I would say, what that means is that there was a secret about how to work with giant blocks of stone, and that secret was protected with a code word that three people knew. And they all were in agreement not to share the secrets of Masonry unless the three were together, could give that code word, and were in agreement that the secrets should be shared at that point. That's not to say that those three were the only ones that had the secret, but that they just couldn't be shared unless the code word was given by the three of them at the same time. One of them was killed, rendering it impossible for the two others to share the secrets of Masonry because there were not three to give the key word. Now in the Royal Arch, this is, some believe this is symbolized by the keystone of an arch. It is very interesting to think that there might have been anciently a secret about how to work with stone. And again, I suggest that secret had to do with the frequency or vibration, but who knows, right? I mean, all we can do now is look at megalithic stone structures, look at key elements that they all seem to exhibit, and try to infer from them what could have been going on. Certainly, there's a lot of evidence to show that many of these megalithic stone buildings were made with, if you will, a kind of concrete. It looks like granite, feels like granite. It is granite. That's what we call it, but maybe it was an ancient concrete-like material that defies our ability to discern how it was made today. And then, there's megalithic stone buildings that have strange knobs sticking out of them. What was the function of those? Anyway, there's a lot of information out there on YouTube, big rabbit hole to go down about, people conjecturing and researching, maybe how these big stone blocks are made and moved into place. Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted myself. The horizontal line represents the physical body, the perpendicular line the psyche. Joining at a right angle, they form a perfect square, the intellectual man composed of mind and body. The hypotenuse typifies the spiritual, and its addition completes the figure. The three sides form one figure, the complete man. The sum of the squares of the perpendicular and horizontal lines equals the square of the hypotenuse. The sum of the three angles is constant. When applied to man, irrespective of the length of the horizontal, the material, regardless of the height of the perpendicular, the psychical, the sum of their squares equals the square of the hypotenuse, the spiritual. In other words, as taught in the mysteries, man's spiritual evolution is affected by and dependent upon his physical and mental development and attainment, but the spiritual always predominates in the complete man. When one begins a quest which ends in the acquisition of a substitute for that of which he is in search, which is the lost word of Masonry. In Masonry, we are given a substitute for the lost word. Logically, let me just reread that sentence. When one begins a quest which ends in the acquisition of a substitute for that of which he is in search, it cannot be claimed he has reached his goal. Logically, the search was foredoomed to failure. The warning is constantly present and repeatedly given that such will be the case. The entered apprentice is told, "Ask and it shall be given you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you." The first letters of each of those spell out the word ask. Ask and it shall be given to you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. Later he is informed, "You there stand as a just and upright Mason," etc. Well, I think that was, let me just finish reading it. But he is not told, "You stand there a just and upright Mason." He is as or like, no definite statement that he is. But in today's ritual, I'm just referencing it here to make sure I'm right. I'm pleased to say that you there stand a just and upright, etc. So I think that's kind of curious. That's why it's always interesting to look at the oldest books, because as time has gone on, things have changed. And as our ritual sort of changes in little ways, original meaning is lost. Okay, anyway. So yeah, I did want to continue here just a little bit further here. This is Steinmetz's Freemasonry, Its Hidden Meaning. And let me get the date here. This is 1948. So not all that old, but I try to go back as far as I can to try to get original ideas on what's going on. In the second degree, he is advised he has received light but partially, which is the negative statement that he has received partial light. It is assumed to apply at the specific time, but could as truthfully be said upon completion of the third degree. The third degree is replete with these veiled hints. The candidate is told that the practice of operating in Masonry has become obsolete, and we now wear our aprons as fellowcraft. An upright admission that we do not operate on the spiritual plane of a Master Mason. Again, he is informed he is about to receive all the light which can be conferred upon him in a lodge. Later the statement is made that no matter what he presumes, he has not reached his goal. And in the ritual of many of the older jurisdictions, which have not suffered the changes to which some of the younger jurisdictions have subjected their rituals, in spite of obligations to respect ancient landmarks, the frank admission is added that it is not known if he will ever accomplish his purpose. Finally, he is told the lodge will no longer pray for him, and that he must perform that duty for himself. Modern Masons, in fact, are only fellowcraft. They are not Master Masons, he says in all caps. The true word, reportedly, was introduced into the Royal Arch in the late 18th century by Dunkerley. At approximately that time, he is said to have, either personally or associated with others, revised the Blue Lodge ritual and to have taken the true word therefrom. Technically, this would confine the Master Mason grade to those who have been exalted to the Royal Arch. In reality, the Royal Arch does not possess the word. It is intellectually, logically provable that the word, so claimed by the Royal Arch, cannot be the lost word of a Master Mason. No degree of Freemasonry can give the candidate the true word, for none possess it, and if they did, they could not communicate it. That is an impossibility. The true word, by its inherent nature, can only be discovered by the individual himself. Previously, the lodge prayed for him, but now he must pray for himself. So I think that's very interesting. I have long suspected that the word that we were given in the Royal Arch degree as being the lost word of Masonry revealed is not. When that word is known, it's like, yeah, that can't be really what the mystery is all about. And Steinmetz seems to agree with that. Moving right along here, we're going to move back in time. So this is Ancient Mysteries and Modern Masonry by Reverend C.H. Hale. Let me get a date for you. Oh yeah, I might have shared this before. This is an interesting frontispiece here. You recognize that symbol. But it's an ancient symbol that goes far beyond what it means to us more modern people. Oh, my copy is a first edition from 1909. I don't know if the camera picks it up, but there you go. It's really nice to have these old books that have relatively acid-free paper and string binding to hold it together instead of glue. So let me just catch my spot here. So he's talking about stones. The Mohammedans have a black stone. The Druids represented their gods by cubical stones. We find that early American races worship square stones. And these citations are taken from Mackay's Symbolism of Freemasonry. And these mystical stones were all symbolic, and the legends connected with them allegories. The Masonic stone and legend are no exceptions. The stone foundation is but a symbol of the deity. And he speaks about the lost word. The symbol of the lost word and the legend of the search for it embodies the whole design of Freemasonry. The primary object of Freemasonry is the search after divine truth. Capital letters, that always means the God, Godhead, Brahman, truth, reality, who we really are, the true self with capital S. This thing that can't be spoken over words, can't be understood by the human intellect, but can be intuited and can be known in a way separate from the thinking mind. Words just fail in trying to talk about it, but it can be discovered for oneself. The word is a symbol of this divine truth, and this truth is the key to the science of the soul. The real master, then, is one learned in the divine science, a Moses to lead the neophyte through a wilderness of experience, from his ignorant self with a lowercase s to a knowledge of his true self with a capital S, a conscious union with God. The symbolism of the lost word may be applied to the degradation of the ancient mysteries, which resulted in the loss of the real world. Real word. The knowledge of occult science. From that time to this, men have ever been in search of the real word. And it's capitalized W. And although but few have been able to regain the knowledge of the true mysteries, with capital M, others have often caught glimpses of the inner meaning, which is symbolized by the substituted word. That the symbolism is not well understood is evident from the fact that but few Masons, if any, today possess the knowledge and power implied in the symbols and legends of the order. For this reason only, the substitute, monitorial explanation is given to the neophyte until he, perhaps in future generations, shall find the true word. That Masonry was in search of the meaning of this symbolic word is clearly proven by the insight of the revisionists in 1717, and the fact that symbolic Masonry did not pretend to give the candidate the lost word. They knew that the word was no mere name, but a knowledge of occult science which could only be attained by soul development. Real mastership must again be realized before the lost word can be found, and such realization must of necessity be the experience of each individual brother by whom it is found. The use made of the tradition of the recovery of the lost word and its impartation in the Royal Arch degree shows that the later degree makers little realized the meaning of the symbolism. They mistook the symbol for the things symbolized. Oh, that's called reification. The real word, which holds the inner meaning and the power of the symbol, is still a mystery. To understand this mystic symbol and all it implies is to possess the key to the science of sciences, the real knowledge, or word of power. Yeah, and that actually concludes his book. He then has a bit of a conclusion. And at the very last sentence, one page later, is so mote it be. It's kind of cool. All right, just one more passage. I can ask for your patience. And I left out some things that I had bookmarked that thought, well, let's keep it a little bit shorter. So this, again, is George Steinmetz. This is The Lost Word and Its Hidden Meaning, a whole book dedicated to the subject. Hopefully the glare is letting you see. And the date on this, let's see, this book has a foreword by Manly Palmer Hall. And let's see, where's the date? 1953 is my copy. And it must be a first edition because there's only the one date on it. And let me see, oh yes, here we go. So this is chapter X, chapter 10, Cosmic Consciousness. That condition of awareness which we wish to investigate has been defined by many authorities in as many different terms: spiritual cognition, illumination, enlightenment, superconsciousness, samadhi, cosmic consciousness. And there's so many more words. It is our hope to demonstrate that it may likewise be defined as possession of the Master's Word. We have chosen the terminology of Dr. B-U-C-K-E, Buck, I suppose, cosmic consciousness, as above all others the nearest approach to a concise description of this state. For a more explicit definition and description than conveyed by the words themselves, we turn to the writing of Dr. Buck. Cosmic consciousness, then, is a higher form of consciousness than that possessed by the ordinary man. This last is called self-consciousness, and is that faculty upon which rests all of our life, both subjective and objective, which is not common to us and the higher animals, except that small part of it which is derived from the few individuals who have had the higher consciousness named. We make a distinction between the two forms of consciousness which we recognize, naming them simple consciousness and self-consciousness. The animal kingdom, or at least that portion thereof which we denote the higher animals, is possessed of simple consciousness. And Dr. Buck asserts that cosmic consciousness is a third form which is far above self-consciousness and is above that of simple consciousness. And, well, he doesn't speak any more about the lost word, except that he says, especially and above all, what may be called a sense of immortality, a consciousness of eternal life, not a conviction that he shall have this, but the consciousness that he has it already. So, I'd like to conclude with just, this thought. Sometimes one might say that God is present, but that suggests there is someone for God to be present to. Rather, I think it'd be more accurate to say that God's presence is immediate and constant in this moment, right now. And all that we experience is the constant expression of this immediate presence unfolding. We attach to attributes of this constant unfolding and believe that to be us, instead of putting our sense of identity on awareness itself, this awareness perhaps being the lost word of Masonry. Thank you all for watching. Please do the like, share, subscribe, and comment thing, which will help this channel be found by more people. And I'll return as time permits.